The air was thick with tension as we prepared for another day of battle during the Riga Offensive in late 1944. The Soviet artillery had been relentless, pounding our positions day and night. The ground shook with each explosion, and the sky was a constant haze of smoke and dust. I was a soldier in the German Wehrmacht, and I could feel the weight of defeat pressing down on us. The Red Army was closing in, and we all knew that holding Riga was becoming an impossible task. Our orders were clear: hold the city at all costs. But as the days dragged on, it became increasingly clear that the costs were too high. We were outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on supplies. Morale was low, and fear was in the eyes of every man around me. We had been fighting for weeks, with little rest, and the relentless Soviet advance was pushing us to the brink. I remember one particular day when the Soviets launched a massive assault. The artillery barrage began at dawn, and it seemed like it would never end. We huddled in our trenches, trying to keep our heads down as the shells rained down on us. The noise was deafening, and the ground trembled beneath us. We could hear the screams of the wounded and the dying, but there was nothing we could do except wait for the barrage to end. When the artillery finally stopped, we knew what was coming next. The Soviets charged our positions with everything they had. Their tanks rolled forward, crushing everything in their path, while their infantry swarmed around them like a relentless tide. We opened fire, but it felt futile. They just kept coming, wave after wave, and we were slowly being pushed back. I could feel the cold sweat running down my back as I aimed my rifle at the advancing enemy. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to stay steady. I fired, reloaded, and fired again, but for every Soviet soldier I brought down, there were 10 more to take his place. The smell of gunpowder and blood filled the air, and the sounds of battle were a chaotic symphony of screams, explosions, and the roar of engines. As the fighting continued, I saw many of my comrades fall. Some were killed instantly by the artillery, others by the Soviet bullets, and some were simply too exhausted to go on. I remember one young soldier next to me, barely out of his teens, who had a look of pure terror in his eyes. He was shaking uncontrollably, unable to fire his weapon. I shouted at him to keep fighting, but it was no use. He was paralyzed with fear, and a moment later, he was gone, cut down by Soviet gunfire. The battle raged on, hour after hour, with no end in sight. We were being pushed back, inch by inch, towards the city. Our defenses were crumbling, and it was clear that we couldn't hold out much longer. The Soviets were determined to take Riga, and nothing we did seemed to slow them down. As night fell, the fighting finally began to die down. We were ordered to fall back to the city, abandoning our positions in the trenches. It was a bitter retreat, but there was no other choice. We were exhausted, battered, and demoralized. The city of Riga was burning, its streets filled with rubble and the bodies of the dead. The once proud buildings were now little more than ruins, and the stench of death hung heavy in the air. I knew then that the end was near. The Soviets would take Riga, and we would either be killed or captured. There was no escape, no hope of reinforcements, no miracle to save us. The realization was crushing, but there was nothing we could do but keep fighting, even though we knew it was hopeless. That night, as I lay in the rubble of a destroyed building, trying to get some rest, I thought about everything that had led us to this point. The years of war, the countless battles, the lives lost, all of it seemed meaningless now. We were just trying to survive. But deep down, we knew that our time was running out.